Welcome to the NBA DFS build. I'm Kevin Roberts, going solo today for this 9-game slate. Going to break down things for DraftKings. It is a little bit early in the day, but I have an obligation later, so I'm going to just hit the analysis now. And you'll just have to adapt to the news that comes out and hopefully build yourself a winning lineup. This video is sponsored by DFS Hero, really good lineup optimizer that has plenty of features that can help you get a takedown. Right now, you can get 15% off when you sign up using our link at the bottom of this video description. If this helps you at all, please give this video a like and also consider subscribing to our channel, the DFS Build, so we can know that we're doing a good job here and also so you can get alerted to future videos. All right, let's dive right into this. It is a 9-game slate. I'm not going to try to go too heavy here or too long, I should say, since it's just me talking. But first game of the slate is the Pacers and the Hornets. The Pacers are 9.5-point road favorites, which is not something you see a lot, but Charlotte is absolute garbage. If we look at the projections here, obviously Tyrese Haliburton looks pretty good. The only problem is he's still on the injury report with his injury management designation, which we don't really trust that he can get to his ceiling. I think he is a decent tournament play just because he is projecting well. He is still cheap. He has a 31.7% boom rating at DFS Hero. So, and obviously it's the Hornets. So he looks great across the board. The only issue is he going to play? I think he will, based off the spread here. And then is he going to play enough over 30 minutes to get you where you need to go? He's not a core play because of that risk, but he is a tournament play just because of what he can do. Obviously, if he's out, Siakam looks awesome at 7.9. With Hallie in, Siakam's not going to have as much usage as he probably needs. But even with Haliburton in, with this matchup at 7.9, Siakam's absolutely my player pool. He looks very interesting. A little surprised he doesn't have a good boom rating in this spot. Let's see, last time he faced the Hornets, actually he's faced them 3 times on the year, and he's averaging 47 fantasy points per game against them. He actually faced them not that long ago and put up 53 with the Pacers. So, yeah, Siakam at 7.9 looks pretty good here. Miles Turner at 6.1 also looks really good. He's projecting well, has a nice 30% boom rating, second best boom rating for the Pacers behind Haliburton. Charlotte does not stop anybody down low, and they even lost another viable big man in PJ Washington via trade. So, yeah, no qualms about Miles Turner, except for the fact that his floor is a bit lower than you'd like, and his minutes can be a little bit volatile. So he's the classic tourney play at 6.1K. Really nice price, really nice matchup. Projection's pretty good, but he can obviously sink your lineup pretty easily. So he's not going to necessarily be a core play for me, but he's pretty close because it's a really good spot. I'm not really looking to get anybody else on this team. I guess you could look at Isaiah Jackson as a punt at 3.5K if Jalen Smith is out. Jalen Smith is questionable. It is a good enough matchup to consider that. Plus, the blowout risk is real. So Isaiah Jackson off the bench, could he go off? Absolutely, he could. So he is viable in tourneys as a punt if there's no other value that opens up. And I'd even look at Benedict Mathurin at 4.8K. Again, this is another guy where the minutes are not really secure. But it's an awesome matchup, and he'll get a lot of usage. So in his role off the bench. But everybody else kind of eats into each other, and I'd really only look at other Pacers if Hallie was out. Moving over to the other side of this game, the Hornets look pretty good because the Pacers also are a pretty good matchup. Obviously, if they'd have to keep this game close, and the spread indicates that they will not. But if they can, Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges, per usual, look pretty good. I would have a lean against Miles Bridges just because he has more upside, and I feel like he has a better floor. He also comes in with a 25% boom rating, which ties with Trey Mann for the best for Charlotte in this spot. But Brandon Miller is a totally fine play. You also have Nick Richards at 5.8, who looks pretty good. The Pacers are also in the bottom 3 for defending the paint. So Richards looks totally fine. Trey Mann at 4.6, Cody Martin at 5K flat. These guys are totally viable in tournaments because it's a good matchup on the other side too. And obviously this game is stackable if you feel like it will stay close. I'm not really getting to anybody else on the Charlotte side, I don't think. Let's just double check the injury report here. Yeah, it's really Miles Bridges up top. You can look at Brandon Miller and there could be some value here that we could take a shot on. Trey Mann in his first game with the Hornets. Sorry, he was with OKC before that. 27 minutes, 31 fantasy points. So he did have 9 assists in that game, and just make her out of that game. I believe he was in. So it can coexist together, which is always nice. So pick your poison there. It is Charlotte. Those are the guys I'll be looking at. Moving on here, we have the Sixers and Cavs in Cleveland. Philly is coming in as massive 10-point underdogs, and this game has a 230.5 total. So if this game stays close, it could be interesting, but I'm not really anticipating that being the case. Joel Embiid remains out. Tobias Harris is on the injury report, so that hurts Philly even more. DeAnthony Melton and Nicholas Batum remain out, and Mohamed Bamba is questionable. So a lot of usage to go around here if these guys are all out for Philly. Tyrese Maxey at 9.3K at the top looks pretty good. The matchup stinks. On the road against Cavs, never good. Cleveland is a good defensive team, and they tend to blow out inferior opponents. So it is a little bit dicey looking at the Philly guys. Harris would look okay at 7.8, and Maxey is totally fine at 9.3K. The only problem is I'm not in love with the matchup. If Harris is out, then you can start feeling a lot better about guys like Buddy Hield, Kelly Oubre, and Paul Reed at 6 flat. So, Paul Reed at 6 flat looks kind of interesting anyways if Bamba is out again, because he's going to be eating up all the center minutes for Philly. He has dealt with a little bit of foul trouble recently, but he has a pretty clear path to 30 minutes and 30 to 35 fantasy points if he's not being so handsy. So I'm not super into the Philly side. I do like the prices and the rolls, especially if Tobias is out, but I'm not ever eager to play guys against the Cavs. On the other side, you have Cleveland. They're at full strength here. Let me just double check the injury report. Yeah, they're fully here. They're ready to go. Guys like Evan Mobley and Darius Garland are kind of still limited to an extent. Yeah, Garland's maxing out at 29 minutes. Evan Mobley is 26 to 27 minutes. And then you factor in a possible blowout. The Cavs will absolutely jump on resting those two guys if they can. Evan Mobley's presence just limits Jarrett Allen's ceiling. So at 7-2, Jarrett Allen's fine. He has a 24% boom rating. It's a decent enough spot with no Embiid there. But honestly, Allen, Mobley, Garland just don't feel great. I think the only guy here that I'd really like is Donovan Mitchell, who's pushing for 50 fantasy points on his projection. But I don't know if I need to make him a priority on this slate. Moving on, one of the best games of the night is the Bulls and the Hawks in Atlanta. Atlanta actually is coming in as a 4-point favorite with a 237 total for this game. So pretty nice DFS environment. We know the Hawks are a top 3 team in pace, and we know they're a bottom 3 team in defense. Let me just double check where the Bulls rest on that side of the spectrum. Sorry, I don't have my pace chart up here. Let me pull it up. I'm pretty sure they're a slower end team. Just double checking. And yeah, they're extremely so. But going into Atlanta's going to dictate the pace here, and their defense is also going to help out a lot because, to be more specific, Atlanta is tied for 28th in defensive efficiency. So those two things combined for a fast-paced game, not a lot of defense, and plenty of points. So per usual, the Bulls look pretty good, and probably I'd say even really good on this slate. The problem is they just still have their main guys, Vooch, DeMar, Kobe. They kind of eat into each other. They're all going to be fine, and one of them is going to blow up. They all have boom ratings north of 30% on this slate, which makes sense because the matchup is sublime, and it's even better than usual because Clint Capella is not there for Atlanta to defend the paint and block shots. Let me double check the availability here of Alex Caruso. Pretty sure he's questionable. He is. So if Alex Caruso is out, that would open it up for Ayo Dosunmu to be a pretty good value. He's playable anyways, but at 5'4", he's creeping up just a little bit to the point where I would very much prefer Alex Caruso to be out before I commit to him in my player pool. And he's not really projecting very well at the moment. So if Caruso's in, I don't think I'd go there. If Caruso's out, I like him a good deal. And you can go with any of the main 3 Bulls guys. Last show, Taylor vouched for Andre Drummond. He got into foul trouble, so he only played 17 minutes. I might kind of ignore that and see that his price came down and he's in an amazing spot. So we don't know for sure how many minutes he's going to play, but he does look like an appealing tournament play once again. Nobody else stands out for that side, so let's kick it to Atlanta, where Trae Young, like usual, stands out as the top play for the Hawks. They are a team that looks to be at full strength, except for Clint Capella being out. So you can look at DeJounte Murray. You can look at Jalen Johnson. They're totally fine. They just don't stand out as priority plays for me on this slate. If you're going to be playing multiple Bulls, which you should at least consider, Trae Young as a run back is pretty appealing. Although for me personally, Trae Young, I never get him right. I don't know what the deal is with Trae Young. He always bombs for me. I mean, you go look at this game log. Trae Young in his last 4 games, he's had 40, 58, 40, 50. You better believe the only 2 times I played him in those 4 games, he got the 40 fantasy points and not the 50. So that's just me personally. I don't know what it is with Trae Young. I can't get him right, but this is a fine spot. The Bulls are not a tough matchup at all, especially if the Hawks dictate the pace here. I will say I also like Onyeka Okongwu a good amount here. His price is coming up. 6.6 is almost getting to be out of reach for me. But the Bulls do not rebound well, and the game environment is pretty inviting, so I will still be looking at him. Saddiq Bey and Bogdanovic are just okay. I'm not really loving getting to them. Moving on to the Spurs and Raptors. The Raptors are not good defensively, and the Spurs are even worse. So this game has a really nice 236.5 total, and Toronto is at home as 6-point favorites. So the spread feels a little bit long considering Toronto is not very formidable. They haven't been very good lately. But as we know, all year the Spurs are prone to getting their asses kicked. So that could happen again. I will say I really like Wemby on this slate because he's Wemby. And his price has still not moved. And he still has a good projection. He's pushing for 50 fantasy points. And let's see here. And the last 2 games, he has not been great. He's been, let me double check exactly where he's been. I think he's under 32 fantasy points in each of his last 2 games. Yep, 32 and 25. So people are going to go game log watching and be like, oh, Wemby not doing great. Or they'll think of Toronto pre-Siakam trade and think like they're a little bit imposing down low or something. Whatever the case, I'm ignoring all of that noise, and I love Wemby here at 8.9. He's got a 33% boom rating, by far the best boom rating for the Spurs. And like usual, he's really the only Spur I'm looking at. I'm not really worried about Jakob Poeltl down low. Wemby's just going to do whatever he wants. The only question is, can the Spurs keep it close? And can he get a few more minutes than what he's gotten lately? Devin Vassell is totally fine at 6.5K, but usually I like to see the Spurs being without a couple bodies for me to go with anybody that's not named Wemby. So it's pretty much Wemby or bust for me here. But Trey Jones 5'7", Keldon Johnson 5'6". These guys are decent prices if you want to take that shot. If you're not in love with the other value. They're playable, but it's mostly Wemby for me. On the other side is Toronto. Pretty sure they're at full strength. Yep, they have everybody here. Scotty Barnes went off for 60 fantasy points in his last game. Taylor and I mentioned him as being a great GPP play, and sure enough, he was. Of course, I didn't play him, but he was good. The Raptors at full strength are not that appealing normally, but against the Spurs, we should have interest here. The Spurs are basically 29th against every position here in the DFS Hero DVP rating. And these guys are all popping. Gary Trent at 4.2K has a 21% boom rating and a reasonable projection for his price. Quickly, Poeltl, Barnes, all over 20% for a boom rating. Barnes projects the best. And if we're to believe that his last game is who he is again, then he looks awesome at 8.5K. The only issue is, let me double check. I feel like Emmanuel Quickly was out for that game. Let's see. So he played 210, or was it RJ Barrett? Oh, I guess they were healthy there. So the fact that they're all healthy does give me a little cause for pause still, though, because in recent weeks, Barnes really hadn't been that productive. He's sharing the usage and the playmaking and the scoring with RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, and even to some extent Bruce Brown and Gary Trent. So the ceiling is still there. He showed us that again in his last game, and the matchup is awesome. But he's, as far as guys in that range go, I still have a little bit of hesitance in using him. We'll note that he also has 17% ownership at the moment. So if he's going to trend towards being chalky, I might deviate a little bit. Across the board, though, Raptors look pretty good here. Moving on, Knicks and Rockets. The Rockets are at home as 3-point dogs, and this game is a 221.5 total. We should have some interest here depending on how news shakes out. I will say I'm not nearly as interested in the Knicks as I have been in recent weeks. Jalen Brunson played in his last game. He's not on the injury report. Isaiah Hartenstein could miss this one, and that would be the one that I pay attention to the most. Because if he's out, then we're looking at Precious Achiuwa eating up all the center minutes for the Knicks. And like his game log, he is playing as much as he can handle. 43, 42, 40, 41, 43. Those are his minutes over his last 5 games here. So Tibbs is not holding back. If they didn't have Hartenstein, Precious is starting. He's playing the 5, and he's going to play a crap ton. There's always the corpse of Taj Gibson to come and eat 20 minutes off the bench. And there could be Jericho Sims. He's probable to play, so he could eat into the minutes off the bench too. I would hope they are smart and just play Precious, and we don't have to worry about that. And I would lean towards that not being an issue. Brunson being in, and the presence of the guys they acquired via trade, Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic, that to me does potentially sap the ceiling of Dante DiVincenzo, of Josh Hart. So those guys are still viable, but DiVincenzo is still hanging out at 8K. Josh Hart's still 6.5. I think if I was going to use any Knicks, it would probably be Precious and Hart. I don't really trust the minutes yet for the new acquisitions, and I'm not paying all the way up for DiVincenzo with Brunson in and these guys they traded for also available. So it's just a murky situation that I'd probably like to avoid on a 9-game slate. On the other side are the Rockets. They have a couple question marks here because Şengün is questionable again. He missed last game, and let's see that he kind of got benched the game before that. But if he's out, then FVV is also out. Tari Eason is out. Cam Whitmore is out. So the Rockets are going to be undermanned again, and that absolutely puts Jeff Green in play. It absolutely gets us on Jabari Smith, on Jalen Green, and even on Amen Thompson, even with his price coming up to 6.7K. Now, I do not think Amen Thompson is the auto lock he has been in the previous 2 slates. I think he's probably still a little bit too cheap at 6.7K, and we probably should gravitate towards using him here, but it's not an amazing matchup. He hasn't been playing well in the last couple of games, and the price is coming up. So I still would gravitate towards using Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, Jabari, and maybe even Jeff Green if Şengün is out. If Şengün is in, I might hope that these guys are chalkier and I get away from them. As far as value, Dylan Brooks at 5.1 is totally fine. His price has come up a little bit, so I'm not as into him as I was last slate. And Aaron Holiday at 3.6K looks like a fine pump play. Next game up, we got the Pels visiting the Grizz in Memphis. Pelicans are 9.5-point favorites with a 222 total. This game is one worth keeping an eye on just because Zion Williamson is forever questionable. If Zion is in at 7.3K, he's pretty appealing. He smashed in his last game. He had 51 fantasy points. In 3 out of his last 4 games, he's had 46+ fantasy points. So he is feeling it right now. Memphis is not a very imposing matchup, although it's worth noting he has not exactly dominated them on the year. I wouldn't really pay much mind to that, though. He's not really popping. His 39-point projection is totally fine. Ingram leads the way for the Pels with the best projection. Nobody really stands out. But as far as price goes, Zion would be the play here for me. If Zion is out, JV at 6.5K looks really good. And then McCollum and Brandon Ingram are very, very playable. And then for value, Herbert Jones and Trey Murphy, maybe even Larry Nance, all would be viable in GPPs. On the other side, you have Memphis. This is just a big band of just okay filler. I mean, Jaren Jackson's always going to be viable at 8.3K. Nice projection, 21% boom rating. It's not the best matchup in the world, and the spread is pretty thick, so I'm not racing to go play him. And also, I can anticipate him getting – he's always the guy who gets in foul trouble. So anytime you're dealing with dudes who push him into the paint and can score inside, like Zion and JV, that's problematic. So I would not be racing to pay 8.3K for Jaren. But in a vacuum, he's a good price and he projects well. Vince Williams, Santi Aldama, they're okay. And I'm not really looking to get into anybody else because they just have a bunch of average dudes just eating into each other's minutes at this point. Next up, one of the top games of the night, Denver at Milwaukee. The Nuggets are 1-point favorites on the road. This game has a nice 230.5 total. So on paper, it looks like one of the better game environments. Good total, close spread, superstar power with Giannis and Jokic. Right away on the Denver side, Jokic looks totally playable and awesome like usual, 11.5K. I mean, it's a lot of money being invested in one guy, but 38% boom rating, one of the better boom ratings on the entire slate. The Bucks have not been known as a good defensive team this year. They just haven't been that good in general under Doc Rivers over the last 6 games or so. So, or is it? It's 7 games now, I believe. I don't see any real reason to not want Jokic. I guess the only reason would be either you prefer one of the other top end studs like Giannis or Luka, or you don't feel like you need to pay that high up on this slate. I am tending to think you do need to get at least, or just, you need to pick one. You need to pick the right guy to pay up for. They're all about the same price. They all project extremely well. And the odds are pretty good that one of those dudes is going to absolutely crush and break the slate. So it could be Jokic, and he's very playable. Jamal Murray, 8.2 looks totally fine. Worth noting, we do need to keep an eye on Denver here because, let's see. Michael Porter Jr. he's probable now. Who's questionable? KCP is questionable. Well, Porter was questionable, so it looks like he's going to play. So that should keep us off, Aaron Gordon and any of the other value here. If KCP is out, you could look to Justin Holiday, who did play 30 minutes in his last game. His price has come up to 4.1K, but there is not a lot of awesome value on this slate at the moment. So Justin Holiday, believe it or not, is technically viable. 21 fantasy points in 37 minutes. Not great, but for the price, you could do worse. But for me, for the most part, it's Jokic or bust for Denver. On the other side are the Bucks. Obviously, Giannis up top looks good. Dame Lillard is probable. Chris Middleton is out. So the most of the usage is going to run through Giannis and Lillard. Lillard at 8.7 looks pretty good. Giannis at 11.7 as a pivot off of whatever stud is more owned. Right now, he's projecting for 2% ownership. So, yeah, if Giannis is going to come in and be 2% owned on this slate and ownership is going to flock to Luka and or Jokic, yeah, Giannis looks pretty good in tournaments. The matchup is not good. I will say that. But earlier this year, he faced Jokic and put up 55 fantasy points. So, I mean, he can get there. The game should be close. There should be a decent amount of points. So Giannis looks plenty good to me. And anytime a stud like that is going to be low to unowned, we must take interest. Lillard's fine at 8.7, but it's not going to be a priority for me. Nobody else stands out. But with Middleton out, you do have to consider the value with Jay Crowder and even Pat Connaughton down here. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens with the minutes with Pat Bev there and, everybody else healthy. So I would probably be looking at Crowder here, but I will note that Denver is ranked second in fewest 3-point makes allowed. So I don't know exactly what Jay's path to success here is. All I know is he is 4.5K and he's been playing a crap ton. He's been playing 30 plus minutes in each of his last 4 games. 37 plus in 3 of the last 4. So he played 30 minutes in a blowout against the Hornets. So, this game is not expected to blow out. So if it does not, 4.5K Jay looks pretty good. All right, moving on. Another really interesting game environment is Wizards versus Mavs. The only problem is it's a 12.5-point spread with the Mavs favored at home and a really nice 247.5 total. So in theory, this could be the game of the night. But do we really trust Washington to keep it tight against the Mavs who, have been looking pretty good lately? I don't. But I don't really have qualms with going to the Dallas side because if they do house Washington, then the guys that you're paying for probably had a really big hand in doing so. So starting with Washington, Kyle Kuzma, his prices come down to 7.5K. So, if you think it's going to stay reasonably close, it's not like Dallas is like a stalwart defensive team or anything. They rank 28th against power forwards for fantasy. So he looks fine. 38 projection, 20% boom rating. he's fine as a run back if you're going to pay for a Mav. And then everybody else kind of just is there. Tyus Jones is okay. Denny Abdia he looks pretty good at 5.9, decent projection, 25% boom rating. I will say this, Bagley checks in at 5.3K, has a decent projection, has a 26% boom rating, second best boom rating on the slate for Washington. And the matchup is good. The only problem is everybody's going to be buying into recency bias here because in his last game, Washington ended up going small a lot, and he only played 15 minutes. So is there concern of paying for Bagley, who could be reasonably chalky, coming at 17% ownership, and him just, not playing enough or just not getting there? Yeah, there is concern there. But the Mavs do have some bigs here, so I don't really envision it being a game where he gets phased out due to a lot of small ball lineups or anything. So it's risky, but I do like Bagley here. And of course, Jordan Poole at 5.6, you can totally play him. I don't like playing him. Let's see, what's he been doing lately? I never know because I don't like playing him. Yeah, just 26, 31, 11, 20, 44. So he has a ceiling, but he also has an incredibly low floor, and he's just not that good. So, yeah, totally fine. You can stack this whole game and hope it doesn't blow out too. But I would start with Bagley. Abdiel, it looks fine, and Kyle Kuz is probably the safest play on the Wiz. On the other side, I love Luka here. Top projection of the slate, 66 fantasy points. Top boom rating of the slate, 41%. The Wizards are right up there with Atlanta or Charlotte as the best matchup of the slate. The only issue with Luka, well, two issues. Number one, he's 12K. But if you're already thinking about paying for Jokic or Giannis, I wouldn't let 15 to 20% ownership on Luka necessarily deter you when he's in such a good spot. It's just tough to bypass that raw, elite points projection. Let's just make sure who's in or out for Dallas. Kyrie is probable. So you could argue maybe Luka doesn't have the same ceiling that he would if Kyrie was out. But just 2 games ago, Kyrie was there and Luka had 79 fantasy points. So I don't really buy into that. I think you can argue that, but I think for the most part, Luka is Luka, and he's just going to have a ton of usage and do everything. And it's him and Kyrie. So you can play Kyrie at 8.8K, just as good of a match for him. He's not going to be mega owned, has a 31% boom rating. But that's probably where I'm going to end it. Daniel Gafford at 5.6K is a little bit interesting, but he did not play enough in his first game with them. He didn't even start. I would probably prefer he starts to really fall in love with that play. All right, moving on. Last game of the night, and one I really, really like. The Warriors at the Jazz. The Warriors are 1-point road favorites. This game has a really nice 240 total. I think when you look at game stacking and just like picking isolated plays, you have to think more than just the game total, more than just the players, but also, is this game going to stay close, and is it going to be, a back and forth battle? That's obviously a legitimate question for the Washington-Dallas game, but this one looks really good. Starting on the Warriors side, Stephen Curry does not project as an elite play, but based on the matchup and based on who he's been lately, I think his projection comes in a little bit light. He's been cooking. He had 30 points in his last game with 55 fantasy points, 42 in the game before that with 54 fantasy points. He's not that far removed from a 60 real point performance when he had 79 fantasy points. He's not faced Utah yet this year, so he's not had the benefit of facing a Jazz defense that ranks 23 against point guards. The best thing about Curry is that he's not going to be owned. A lot of the ownership is going to flock to these mega studs, and then the next level of guys like Maxey and Trey and all that. So Curry is a little bit more expensive than Maxey, and I think he's more expensive than Trey too. He is by 100. So he's not going to be owned. He's in a smash spot. It's the hammer game of the slate. So yeah, I have a lot of interest in Curry. I would probably look to pair him with one of those other studs if I can, if there's enough value to do it. Or if you're not going to take a stud, maybe just a pivot off of a chalkier option up there. Also, I really like Kuminga. His price has come down a little bit. He just has a really good floor at this point. And he's just been a really reliable, consistent DFS performer. And the Jazz are a really good matchup, 29th against power forwards. So sign me up for that if I can get to him. Excuse me. Tickle in the throat. My gosh. Okay. So he looks good. I mean, there's nothing to deter me from Kuminga beyond the price. If I can get to that price safely and I'm not forcing it, I like my good amount. Same with Draymond Green at 5.9K. He looks totally fine. Brandon Podziemski, I can never say that name the first time. 6K, totally fine play. I do not think we can trust Klay Thompson at this point. He's coming down hard. It's always tough to fade at 5.2K, but I'm really looking at Curry, Kuminga, Draymond, and Pod. On the other side, to end things, we got the Jazz. Marketing, topping him off at 8.4K, 20% boom rating. He's not going to be owned. He projects for over 41 fantasy points in a pretty decent spot. I don't think these teams have faced it all yet this year, have they? No. So he's not seen this matchup. In theory, it's not the best if he's going to be matching up with Draymond Green, but I'm not that worried about it. He's the safest Jazz guy you can use. But Walker Kessler is the guy who really stands out here. He could feast down low against the Warriors. There's always the fear that he won't get the minutes he needs, but he's 5K flat, and he got 27 minutes in his last game, and that turned into 36 fantasy points. So, yeah, he looks pretty good. It's going to be tough to fade him. He is coming in as pretty hefty chalk at 26% ownership. But he does have a 32% boom rating. As I said, it's not a bad spot. Jordan Clarkson, totally fine. John Collins and Sexton, as I said. The other guy that stands out for value would be Keontae George. I've been vouching for him for weeks now. Really good, talented rookie. He can score. He can set up his teammates. He's got a nice, decent usage role off the bench, and his minutes have been pretty consistent. So at 4.2K, you can do a lot worse. I will mention Chris Dunn, too, at 4.1. He's kind of splitting. They're kind of like all eating into each other. George, Dunn, Sexton, and Clarkson. It just, you never really know who's going to get the more minutes than the others. But they all are viable, and George and Dunn at those cheap price tags look pretty interesting. All right, to wrap things up here, let's take a real quick look at the ownership for players right now. Right now, let's see. That's a little surprising that so the projection. Yeah, if you look up top for the top projection guys, I don't know if this sticks, but Luka at 15, Jokic at 10, Giannis at 2. Major opportunity here for Giannis at 2%, but just in general, if these top studs are going to be unowned. Then you look at the ownership, though. Draymond Green is the chalkiest play. I don't think I need to force Draymond Green at 5.9K if he's going to be that chalky. And then a Wizards player coming in as the second chalkiest play. Those Jazz guys I mentioned look pretty good. People are picking up ownership there with them. The Bulls with DeMar DeRozan stand out. So it's hard to go against the logic of a lot of these plays, but if Draymond Green is going to be the chalkiest play on the board, that's probably where I would start, and maybe use Kuminga as an unknown leverage play if you can get the extra $1,200. Is a good spot for Dre, but he's not the most reliable scorer, and he's a volatile personality to begin with. So I might just try to get away from that if I can. And then if Chris Dunn is going to be chalky, I would eat the Keontae chalk because I just think he's the better play, and then fade Chris Dunn. And again, like I said, Miles Turner, really good, solid play here, but he's picking up a lot of ownership, and he is a volatile player in general. So these are things that you need to consider. That does not mean you absolutely have to fade these guys. They should be in your player pool. They are chalk for good reason. But yeah, just a lot to keep in mind when you're building your lineups or setting your lineup exposure. Speaking of which, we can quickly calculate what DFS Hero likes. And you'll see a lot of chalk because this is basically a cash game build. So you see Tyus, Vassell, DeMar, who I talked about, Wemby, who I talked about, Miles, Keontae, Avdia, and Walker Kessler. So it's really chalky. So I'm fine with building around Wemby as your top stud. If you don't like Giannis, Luka, Jokic tonight, or just don't think they're necessary, that's fine. But you have to get different at some point. Wemby at 12% and everybody else over 20% ownership, I don't think that's different enough. So you'll just have to, I would probably get down off of Vassell and pay up over a chalky Miles or pay up over a chalky DeMar or something like that. I think a lot of the core plays here look good and there's good reason behind them, but you're not going to get a takedown eating chalk. You can get really high and get a takedown by eating a good amount of chalk, but I would say at least 2 healthy, logical pivots would be a good idea. As far as the boom rating goes, I mean, I went into the slate thinking I was going to absolutely pay for Luka, and I still think I'm going to. Just his raw points and his ceiling, it's really tough to go against the Wizards on this slate. But whether you like Luka or not, I would just go with one of those top end studs and then find a second guy like Wemby or Steph or Trey or whoever, a second guy to pair with him that you feel has a pretty good ceiling and maybe will be not super chalky that can help carry the rest of your lineup, because there does appear to be enough value to help us get to where we want to go, even with a pricey guy like Luka in our lineups. So you can actually take advantage of this optimizer and play with it yourself by clicking the link below this video. 15% off to take advantage of it right now. Overall, hopefully this breakdown helps you a little bit, gets you nudged in the right direction. If it does, please like this video and also consider subscribing to the channel so you can be alerted for future videos. That's going to do it for me, and I'll see you at the top of the GPPs.